We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph in Meseches Nazir. This is Nazir Daf 43a. And the previous summit, the Gemara says that when a Nazir enters an enclosed area of Tumah, in Oel HaMeis, so then at the same time that he's becoming Tameh, he's also violating the Yisur of entering an Oel HaMeis, and therefore he's going to be Chayiv too. And so the Gemara now asks, it's not really happening at the same time. Bebayis Nami in a house also. Kevan de oil yode istoiv. The moment his hand enters, he becomes tameh, but he hasn't entered the enclosed area himself. Ki ayil kulihai tameh, and when he enters his whole body, so he's already been tameh before from when his hand entered, and so therefore it's not all happening at the same time. And so the Gemara says, Elamar Rebbe Elazar tziref yado mishum tumah ika mishum bioleka. Rather, Rebbe Elazar says when his hand enters first, so there is tumah and there's no bia at that moment. You're correct. It's not happening at the same time. What case were we talking about where it all happens at the same time? But tziref gufo, that's if he enters with his body into the enclosed area. Tumah uvia bahade hadadi ka'asu. The tumah and the entering, they all happen at the same time. But the Gemara still asks, but still it's impossible that his nose doesn't enter first. A person basically can't enter, a person's entire body can't enter all at the same time. So then he's going to become Tameh before he's actually entered the enclosed area, before he's entered the Oel HaMeis. Elamar Rava, rather Rava says, when the person's hand enters, so there you have tumah, and there again you do not have bia. However, hichnes gufo, but let's say he enters. The idea over here is he enters in a way where his whole body enters at the same time. He puts his head up straight. So in that case, hichnes gufo tumah bia bahade hadadi ka'asyon. So then when he enters with his whole body at once, you could have a scenario where the tumah and the bia happen at the same time. But the Gemara still asks, but it's still impossible. His toes must be entering first. The point is there must be some part of his body that enters first, and he contracts the tumah before you can actually say that he's entered, before you have the bia, v'nachaslu tumah, the tumah has already come before he's entered, so we still don't really have a case. And so the Gemara comes up with some scenarios. Elamar Papa says, Kegon shenichnas b'sheida tevo migdal. The case could be as follows. Let's say he enters in a chest or a box or a cabinet, so it's protecting him from the tumah. Ubachaveru parolav esamaziva, and then his friend comes and he opens up this box or this chest, and so then at the exact same time, the tumah bia bahade hadadi ka'asyon. That could be a case where the tumah and the bia happen at the same time. The Gemara gives another scenario. Mar Baravashi says, Kegon da'ayel keshu goses. Let's say a person enters when he's a goses, he's dying, but he hasn't yet died. V'nafek nishmase, and then he dies. So at the Yosef, so then when he's sitting there, this other person's already in the room, and somebody dies in the room. The tumah ubia v'hade hadadi, and that would be a case where the tumah and the bia, they happen at the same time. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Lahei Chalo, the pasuk by a Kohen says that he's not allowed to deal with those who are dying because he's not allowed to profane himself. And the Tanna Kama says it means that Shosh Yamas, it means until the moment of death, meaning the Kohen is allowed to deal with those who are dying up until the moment of death. It's only when they actually die that is a problem of being profaned. Rebbe says it's from a different pasuk. This is a pasuk by Nazir. Whatever is written by Kohen, we understand applies to Nazir and vice versa. Rebbe says the pasuk says b'mosam yitma ad sheyamas. Again, it says b'mosam till their death, and so therefore we understand lo yitame lohem b'mosam means only until they actually die, but before the death, there's no prohibition. My Beinayu, what's the difference between the Tanna Kama and Rebbe? They seem to be saying the same thing. Rabbi Yochanan says, Mashmos Dor Shanika Beinayu. It's just a difference in terms of where you make the drasha from, but they are both saying the same thing. Reish Lakish says, Goses Ika Beinayu. There's a difference. The difference between them is a Goses, meaning let's say you have a person who is not yet dead, but he is going to die. In that situation, Lamando Amar mi lahecholo afilu Goses. If you say from lahecholo, so then even a Goses, there'll be a prohibition of dealing with a Goses. Lamando Amar b'mosam, but the one who learns it from b'mosam, ad sheyom was in, the prohibition is only by the actual death. It's only coming in contact with an actual corpse, but Goses lo. There is no prohibition of coming in contact with a Goses of somebody who is certainly going to die. And the Gemara continues, according to the one who learns from Lahechalo, and therefore says a Goses is also included. What about the pasuk of B'mosam? The Gemara says, that man da'amar, we'll use b'mosam for the teaching of Rebbe. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Rebbe says, b'mosam me'eno metami, in their death, there's no tumah. Avol metami b'negasam uvizivasam. But when it comes to a Nazir, so there's a prohibition of coming in contact with a corpse, but there is no prohibition of becoming tameh through negoyim, meaning through tzaras or through ziva. Those kinds of tumah are not included in the prohibition. Ulaman damar b'mosam, and according to the one who says that we learn it from b'mosam, hami boile lahaisvar. Well, don't we need b'mosam for what we just said for Rebbe's teaching that the prohibition is only by tumas meis, and there's no prohibition by negoyim, by mitzora, and by ziva. And so the Gemara says, Im kain lema kra b'mos. If that's all it was teaching, it could have just said b'mos. My b'mosam. Why does it say b'mosam? That's a double extra. Shamat mi not tarti. You actually learn both. You learn from b'mosam, number one, that the prohibition applies only to an actual corpse, not to a goses. And additionally, you learn out that the prohibition applies only to a corpse, but not from tzaras and not from ziva. And the Gemara continues, Ulaman damar b'mosam, according to the one who learns from b'mosam, haksiv lahechalo. The pasuk says lahechalo. What is lahechalo for? And the Gemara says lahechalo lahachiu da'asa. Lahechalo is used for the following: b'mi she'eno mechulol. We're talking about somebody who's not already profaned. Yatsa zeh shemechulol v'yomi. That would exclude someone who's already profaned, somebody who's already tameh. The prohibition would not apply. But the one is using lahechalo. Don't we need lahechalo already for this idea that someone who's mechulol v'omed, the prohibition doesn't apply? Im kain, the Gemara says, if that were the case, lemakra lahechal, it could have just said lahechal. My lahechalo, what's the extra lahechalo? Shamat min tarti. We can learn out both halachas. Again, we can learn out the halacha that it doesn't apply to somebody who's already profaned, and we can also learn out the halacha lahechalo teaches us that it applies to a goses as well. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following Mishnah in Olos, Adam eino metame ala acha teitze nafsho. If a person dies, the tumah only happens when the person actually dies. V'afilu meguyed v'afilu goses. Even if the person has major injuries, or if a person is a goses, a person is certainly going to die. There is no tumas meis yet. The tumas meis only happens when the person is actually dead. Now, according to the one who says that a kohen is not allowed to deal with those who are dying, even a goses, so hakatani de'eno metame. It says that there is no tumah until the person actually dies. So why would we say the kohen is not allowed to deal with a gose, someone who's not yet already dead but is dying? The Mishnah says clearly in a holos that the tumas meis only happens when the death actually occurs. And the Gemara answers le'inyan temuye adenafka nasha. You're right. There's the following distinction in terms of tumah that does not happen until there's an actual death. That everyone agrees. Le'inyan ischule ha'ischa. However, according to the one who learns from lahechalo, that's an isser for the kohen to profane himself, and that profaning happens even before the actual death, and so therefore the prohibition for a kohen might be before the actual tumah takes effect. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Beis.